Hello, everyone, and welcome to Penning the Past. I'm Dean Glass, and I thank you so much for joining us today. Today's program invites us to reconsider a story many of us think we already know. When we talk about California modernism, cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco usually take center stage. But as we'll discover today, San Diego developed a modernist tradition that is every bit as compelling and distinctly its own. At the heart of that story is architect Irving J. Gill, whose forward-thinking designs helped lay the foundation for regional style defined by simplicity, climate sensitivity, and a quiet kind of innovation that still resonates today. We're especially pleased to welcome Reverend Dr. Mark Hargreaves, whose work brings together theology, art, and architectural history in a truly unique way. Based in La Jolla, he serves as rector of St. James by the Sea and has spent years exploring the deeper meanings embedded in design and the built environment. His book, The Distinct Modernism of San Diego, uncovers a vibrant and often overlooked chapter of our city's architectural story, tracing a lineage of architects shaped by Gill's ideas and the collaborative spirit that define the region. As always, please put any questions in the chat feature and we will get to those at the end of the program. And now, please join me in welcoming Reverend Dr. Mark Hargreaves.
You'll see from the book cover that I am the co-author of this book. My colleague, Hallie Swenson, is a young student of architecture. Sadly, she can't be with me today because she is currently studying in London. And I met Hallie in 2021. Like me, she's not from San Diego. And we decided together to embark on this project to highlight the quality and distinctiveness of San Diego's modernist architecture. We soon discovered that the distinctive modernism of San Diego can be traced all the way back to Irving J. Gill, a figure I'm sure that we're all familiar with. He was a pioneering modernist, a figure of national and international importance, who set San Diego on a unique architectural trajectory at the beginning of the 20th century. And we make the argument in the book that Gill initiated a particular form of modernism in San Diego, and we have sought to examine Gill's legacy. For too long, Gill has been studied in isolation, and the story has been told that he was ahead of his time and that his influence was erased by the emergence of the Spanish colonial revival, which exploded at the 1950 Panama Pacific exhibition in Balboa Park. But we argue in the book that Gill's legacy survived through the people that he influenced. And fundamental to our project is the family tree, which you can see on the screen, which shows the architectural apostolic succession which there is in San Diego. And of course, there's many other names that could be added to this tree. We've kept it simple because we're not looking to be exhaustive. The book focuses on just 8 architects and the relationships between them. We're setting down markers, and we hope that others come after and fill in the detail. Gill's legacy has gone unnoticed because I think there is no one San Diego style of modernism in the way that there is, say, with the Sarasota school. There is instead a family of architects who shared certain principles and characteristics and a history which allows them to be viewed together. There may not be a San Diego style, but there's most definitely a San Diego lifestyle, and a movement emerged here in San Diego which reflects that lifestyle. But let me start at the beginning with Irving J. Gill, known as Jack to his friends, born in 1870, died in 1936, and buried in 2024. I know this because I had the privilege of officiating at his burial service. My day job is to be an Episcopalian priest, and Gill was himself an Episcopalian, so I thought that was a good fit. That's me at the front in the robes, and you'll see Gill's ashes are just on the right. They were found, they're on the right of the image there next to the urn. That's the package that was found on the shelf of a San Diego cemetery a couple of years ago. And They made their way to the Irving J. Gill Foundation, and then we gave him a fitting burial. I know that you're not meant to meet your heroes because they always disappoint, but I figured that there could be no disappointment in this context. Gill came to San Diego in 1893, born in Syracuse, New York. He had no academic training as an architect, but he went to Chicago as a young man, where he received excellent training as an apprentice in two of the city's leading modernist practices. And remember that Chicago was at the epicenter of modernist architecture at this time. Gill worked first in the office of J.L. Silsby, and then with Dankmar Adler and Louis Sullivan. This was the leading architectural practice in the city, and he worked there along with a certain Frank Lloyd Wright. This is a very important building that came out of the office at that time. It's called the Charnley-Persky House, built in 1892. It's a very important building in the history of modernism. In typical Wrightian fashion, Frank Lloyd Wright claimed to be the architect. He wasn't. It was designed by Adler and Sullivan. Wright was, though, the chief draftsman. We can't know for sure, but given that Gill was working alongside Wright at this time in the drafting room, it's very probable that Gill worked on this project. He left Chicago the next year, but he maintained throughout his life a friendship with Frank Lloyd Wright. Well, he stayed in touch with him. I'm not sure anyone could ever be considered a friend of Wright, but they were certainly in touch. Gill brought a great wealth of experience with him to San Diego, and he was imbued with the latest modernist principles, but he couldn't apply them straight away. He entered first into a very successful partnership with William S. Hebard. They had some significant projects, including the Normal School, built in 1896 in Normal Heights, now demolished. This large neoclassical building is not what one imagines a Gill building to look like. In 1907, with his reputation in the city secure, Gill's partnership with Hebard came to an end, and he set up a new firm with an architect called Frank Mead, who is in his own right a very significant and important architect who needs and deserves more attention. The first project they did was the Allen House in Bonita in 1907. And it's been pointed out to me that there is, if you think about imaginatively, there's a certain passing resemblance to this house and the Charnley-Persky House that I showed you. Gill said that he was looking to establish a new architecture of the West. And there's certainly a feeling of freshness and newness about this building. It's reckoned to be the first anti-ornament house in America. The horizontal porch at the center is framed by vertical corner massing, and it has an elegant, simple facade. And it's important to note that Gill's new architecture wasn't looking to start from scratch, as the modernists in Europe were, who were coming a bit later than Gill. He wasn't ignoring history and tradition and all that had gone before. In contrast, Gill was attempting to use the architectural traditions he found in the West as a starting point. He wanted to create a new style which was in harmony with the environment, both the built and the natural, and that he found in his new home city. Gill identified two types of building which he thought were worthy of sources of inspiration. The first type of building Gill admired was the missions. You'll see on the left is the San Diego Mission de Alcala. And Gill knew this building well, because when he arrived in San Diego, it was in a poor state of repair, and the firm of Hebard and Gill were employed to work on the foundations. Gill appreciated the elegant simplicity of the missions, their long arcades, the central courtyard, and simple geometric forms, plus the way that the whiteness of the building contrasted with the bright blue San Diegan sky. The image you see on the right of your screen was designed by Gill in 1907. You'll see the similarity with the missions. That's the original St. James by the Sea Episcopal Church in La Jolla, where I now serve. Actually, the building wasn't demolished when they built the new church. They put it on rollers and rolled it a few blocks up the street. So it's still around, about 5 blocks away. It now belongs to another church. Gill was also inspired by the Pueblo buildings that he found in the West. He liked their rectangular massing, again, the central courtyard and the simple detailing. Such were the sources from which Gill constructed his new architecture for the West. The genius of Gill was his ability to integrate the modernist principles he brought from Chicago with the architectural traditions and climate of San Diego. It was R.M. Schindler who first drew the comparison between the work of Gill and that of Adolf Loos, his exact contemporary in Europe. He was Austrian, actually, who brought, and it was Loos who taught both Schindler and Richard Neutra, the two leading California modernists. And Loos is regarded as one of the most important forerunners of the modernist movement in Europe. And what you see on the screen on the right is one of Loos's most famous projects, the Steiner House from 1910. There's no suggestion that Gill and Loos were in direct contact, although Loos did visit the Sullivan office in Chicago in 1893 when Gill was there. But there's no record of any correspondence between them. And it's not hard to see why Schindler made the comparison between what Loos was doing in Austria and what Gill was doing in San Diego. The image, let me go back, sorry. The image on the left here is Gill's children's home in Balboa Park, sadly now demolished, built in 1908, so before the Steiner House. And there are obvious similarities with Steiner's house, though it should be said that Gill's home is not only earlier than the Steiner House, it's more refined. And Hallie, my colleague, is always keen to point out that this is the back of the Steiner House. The front is less daring. This is the Tietz House, built in Bankers Hill in 1912, and I've included this image because I think it's simply a fabulous design, and we liked it so much we commissioned a painting of it to be on the cover of the book. And also because Cliff May, who we'll be considering later, was raised on Albatross Street in Bankers Hill, opposite this house, and he remembered these houses being built, and he used to play in them as a child. Here's a building that many people will be familiar with, the Women's Club in La Jolla from 1914. The image on the left is significant, as what we see here is Gill's use of tilt-up concrete. Gill loved to innovate. He experimented with concrete, and this is a very early use of the tilt-up method. As well as showing his innovative side, the building is also an example of how Gill liked to integrate his buildings with nature. He never added architectural ornamentation. He relied instead for nature to decorate his buildings. The arcades, courtyards, and large windows serve to blur the distinction between the inside and the outside. This is a very beautiful building. I've been reminded of that because my son had his wedding reception there 3 weeks ago, and I was amazed just at how beautiful this building still is. And Gill was always keen to say that he pursued beauty, something that his contemporaries in Europe would never have been caught saying. Here's my favourite Gill building, the First Church of Christian Science on Coronado, built in 1928. You'll see a photograph there and a sketch. It's a wonderful example of Gill's rigorous geometry. It's a great example of his cubic massing. The building is simply several cubes put together, and there are 7 roof levels. My colleague Hallie drew this sketch, which shows how many of Gill's buildings are characterized by this massing. The Coronado Church that I just showed you is on the left. On the right is the Scripps House in La Jolla, which now houses the Museum of Contemporary Art. And in the middle is the Dodge House in Los Angeles, reckoned to be Gill's masterpiece, scandalously demolished in the 1970s because there wasn't a group like SOHO around to preserve it. Gill ran his office as an atelier. He influenced a whole generation of architects and builders. He was an inspirational mentor. He was collaborative and innovative, He pursued the beauty of simplicity. He was a proudly regional architect who strove to create work in harmony with its surroundings and its context. And these came to be the defining characteristics of San Diego modernism. As we go on, we'll show how those influenced by Gill carried on these principles in their work. So I'm going now to move on from Gill, and I know I've been looking at material which I'm sure has been familiar to many of you, but I now want to move on to say something about one of his proteges, Hazelwood Waterman. Waterman owed her career to Gill, and Gill's relationship with her shows his gift for spotting and mentoring talent. There she is. I'll just mention in passing that of the architects on the family tree, which I showed you at the beginning, 2 are women. One had Native American heritage and another was of Hispanic heritage. And this at a time when architecture was very much the preserve of white men. Waterman's story is very interesting. She first met Gill when she commissioned Gill and his then partner Hebard to build her a house called the Granite Cottage, which is photographed there on the left of your screen. And the house is still there in Bankers Hill. It's got a prairie style feel to it. And Gill noticed that Waterman took an active interest in the design process. She wrote an article about the process for Good Housekeeping. And she wrote about how she liked the link between the indoors and the outdoors. She appreciated the healthy and sanitary nature of the house. Gill did his trick here of eliminating all the baseboards and casings and anything else that might gather dust. And Waterman liked that the house was simple and without ornament. And Gill told her that she had a natural gift for architecture and encouraged her to pursue it. When her husband died in 1903, she decided to take up Gill's suggestion. She embarked on a correspondence course, and Gill gave her lessons in perspective drawings after hours. She had a natural flair for drafting, and Gill hired her to do ink traces on linen. In 1910, Waterman set up on her own. Things went well for her, and she soon took on a young woman called Lillian Rice, who was working part-time as a teacher. She may well have met Rice through her daughter Helen. Helen Waterman rowed in the same crew as Rice at ZLAC, the Women's Rowing Club. She would have told her mother about this bright young woman who'd studied architecture at Berkeley. And they might also have met at the Wednesday Club in Hillcrest, where they were both members. This is the Wednesday Club, designed by Waterman in 1911. And we should note the importance of women in the history of San Diego modernism. The Women's Club was at the center of a community of educated, talented, ambitious, and progressively minded women, and many of them were Gill's patrons. Ellen Browning Scripps was, of course, Gill's most famous female patron, but there were several others. If you're a progressive, modern architect, you need to have people who want modern houses, and the Women's Club was made up of many such people. One such person was Catherine Tietz, whose house from 1912 I've already shown you. She, along with her domestic partner, Alice Lee, commissioned Waterman to build 3 houses opposite the Marston House in 1905. This was before Waterman qualified as an architect. So Tietz asked if Gill could be the architect of record, and let Waterman do all the plans, which she did. Gill still gets the credit for this work, even though it's Waterman's names on the drawings. I'd like to show you what I think was Waterman's most significant building, which was the Children's Hospital, now sadly demolished, again, which used to be in Balboa Park. The photograph on the left of your screen is the east wing of the building, which is on the right side of the smaller image on the right side of the screen. And the influence of Gill is very evident in this large building. Note the cubic massing, the lack of ornamentation. Gill was clearly an inspirational figure. Waterman wasn't the only person he talent spotted and trained, and that's why his legacy continued after his death. He left a strong and cooperative culture. One final word on Waterman. What's interesting about her isn't just that she was a female architect at a time when most architects were male. It's that she was a female modernist architect, which really is a very small group of people. I think that Waterman and the milieu on which she was a part deserve much more attention. And I've heard Molly McLean lecture on this, and I'm delighted that she's doing some work on this because there's a great story to tell about the role of women and the progressive movement in San Diego. The next architect I want to talk about is Lloyd Roaco, and I've been assured that that is the correct pronunciation. To put Roaco in context, we need to go back to Lillian Rice, who, as I've already mentioned, worked with Hazel Waterman. Now, bear with me for a moment. I'm going to mention several names, but this will serve to give you a flavour of the book that I'm talking about and from. A big part of what we write is telling the story of how all the characters who feature on our family tree are related, who worked with who, and who influenced who. Rice left Waterman's office to work with someone called Richard Requa. He'd come from Nebraska, where he was working as an electrician. He got a job in Gill's office as a project manager, and he ended up falling out with Gill after just a couple of years, and he set up on his own as an architect, which was a bold move given that he'd had no architectural training, just what he'd picked up working in Gill's office. But it was a bold move that paid off spectacularly. Requa went on to have a stellar career, and he's another person in San Diego's history who deserves more attention. His is a real rags to riches story. His great breakthrough came when he rebuilt the town of Ojai after a fire in 1915. And on the back of that job, he won the commission to rebuild or to build Rancho Santa Fe in 1922. This was a job he delegated to Lillian Rice because he had more lucrative work to do in San Diego. In 1926, Requa ran a competition in the Union Tribune for readers to design a house in his new development in Kensington Heights. I use the word competition loosely as it was all rigged. The winner, Mrs. Fikesine, worked in Requa's office. What's interesting about this and why I'm showing it to you is you'll see that at the bottom of the screen, there's a third prize. And this was a special third prize of $25 to a schoolboy named Lloyd Roaco. He was so impressed by Roaco's entry that he gave him a job in his office. So while he was still at high school, Roaco was working in Requa's office. Later on, Requa sent Roaco to work with Lillian Rice in Rancho Santa Fe. And he already knew Rice, as she had been his drafting teacher at San Diego State Teachers College. So I hope you're still with me. That was a lot of names there. But I wanted to show how the lives and careers of so many significant San Diegan architects are all intertwined. Maybe that's no surprise because San Diego was still a very small city at this time. Lillian Rice and Richard Requa were very aware of Roaco's abilities, and they encouraged him to go to study architecture at Berkeley, which he did. He arrived at Berkeley with a thorough grounding in architecture from Rice and Requa, so when he was exposed at Berkeley to European modernism, he'd already been indoctrinated with such architectural principles of simplicity, harmony, and the need to be sensitive to a site that he'd got from his time in San Diego. Roaco appreciated what was coming out of Europe and the work of Walter Gropius, Mies van der Rohe, and Le Corbusier, but he didn't go all in with them. He was always apart from that strand which was so dominating the school at the time. He integrated what he learned at Berkeley with his San Diego principles and with other strands of modernism, such as the California architects like Bernard Maybeck and William Wurster, and of course the important figure of Frank Lloyd Wright. The first house that Roaco built for himself was called Il Cavo in 1946. It was in La Mesa. Very sadly, it's being demolished. The house had a lovely, warm, cozy feel. There are no right angles in the building because it was built around boulders and trees in the landscape. And apparently the floor plans were completed after the building was built, which shows just how organic the process was. Materials were short in this post-war period, so ingenuity was required. You'll see in the photograph on the left, a telegraph pole has been incorporated into the staircase. And on the right, in that image on the right, note the very early example of a fire pit on the right of that image. If on the left here, you can see driftwood used imaginatively in the bathroom. The house featured in a 1950 exhibition of trends in Southern California architecture. And it's all the great and the good, the familiar names of California modernism were part of that show. And Racco stood out as being very different to the rest. A reviewer of the exhibition said of Racco's work that it showed drama without artiness, design without cliche. A very apt description of Racco's work. The house is more organic and less ideological than the LA architects included in the show. It's obvious that Racco's original work was drawing on a wide range of influences. He was an imitator of no one. Racco was married quite late in life to Ilse Harman, a professor at San Diego State. Here they are pictured together in Il Cavo. Ilse was an elegant, capable woman who had a significant influence on Racco. They were a power couple. Ilse was the first person to import Scandinavian furniture to San Diego, and she had a shop in the design center, which until very recently was lovingly created at a wonderful exhibition at the Mingay, which I hope some of you got to see. And if you didn't, there's still, for a couple more weeks, a magnificent show at the Mingay of mid-century ceramics. And I would encourage you to go to that if you've not been. Racco built the design center in 1945. It's still there on Fifth Avenue in Hillcrest. This was an extremely influential building. It looks like a single level building from the street, but it steps down into the canyon beyond, and it has Racco's characteristic L shape. It's a very good example of what was called Racco's phantom architecture. The building had a light and airy feel. It's almost ethereal, as if it's disappearing into the landscape. It was described as, quote, minimal architecture with nature showing through. Racco was a great teacher and inspirational character. The design center was at the center of all things modern in San Diego. It was a real hub where ideas about progressive thinking were exchanged. There were always meetings and gatherings going on there, and Racco was invariably at the center of it. A journalist said of him that at his most urgent and fervid, Racco would sound like Walt Whitman and James Joyce talking at once. He's on the left of this image here in that group scene, and I think that captures some of his fervor. Racco has a large and important building here in La Jolla. He built the Institute of Oceanography in 1964. The fact that Lloyd and Ilse were very good friends with Walter and Judith Monk may have helped him win this commission, which he won over Richard Neutra. And this large building, made entirely of redwood, again, you'll see it's an L shape. And this allows it to have many points of access and plenty of ventilation. And most of the rooms have views of the ocean. It's another building beautifully integrated into its site. After the war, Racco's circle was enriched by the arrival of half a dozen of Frank Lloyd Wright's former apprentices. They were to have a significant influence on San Diego in this period and the development of modernism. I'm going to mention two of those apprentices. The first was Fred Liebhardt. Liebhardt was studying at the University of Denver when Frank Lloyd Wright came to deliver a lecture. The students pinned up drawings for the great man to see and review, and only 3 of the pictures attracted Wright's attention. and he was surprised to find out that all three of them were by the same person, Fred Liebhardt. Wright invited Liebhardt there and then to Taliesin. Leave now, he said, before they ruin you, and he went. He went east with his wife Marianne, who was herself a talented interior designer. Fred was fast-tracked once he got to Taliesin. He bypassed the entry-level roles and went straight into the drafting room. He only stayed a year or so. Wright said that he only regretted losing 3 apprentices, John Lautner, Rowan Maiden, and Fred Liebhardt. The Liebhardts arrived in La Jolla in 1950, and Fred went to work with Lloyd Rocco for a time. Liebhardt's father died around this time, and he left him a significant amount of money, which gave him a measure of independence and freedom. And in 1951, he was able to build himself a house. In 2019, this wonderful house was historically designated. It was labelled an outstanding example of organic geometric design. Now, I'm not sure of the origin of the phrase organic geometric. It's not widely used. I have a suspicion it was invented here in San Diego to describe some of our distinctive buildings. It certainly fits with what Liebhardt was doing at this time, and it's a great description of a house that blends organic design with geometric rigor. Liebhardt brought with him the organic architecture that he learned at Taliesin. And on arriving in San Diego, he'd have encountered the rational geometric tradition established by Gill. Now, in many parts of America, and indeed Europe, these two strands, the organic and the rational, were in tension. But here in San Diego, one of the characteristics of our city is that these two strands were successfully merged and combined. The house is built on a steep slope, and it was specifically designed for that location. You'll see that the roof line mirrors the incline in the terrain there. It connects the roof connects the building to the hillside. It has several levels in the house to match the topography of the site, so the site wasn't graded. The house was built to fit with the topography. Here's a photograph of the entryway taken by Julius Schulman, and we see how the house is embedded in the environment. The spider legs reach out and root the buildings in the earth, and we see the extensive use of natural materials. The rocks soften the appearance of the concrete. Fred and Marianne collected the rocks by hand locally. The pillars that you see here point to the geometric nature of the design. The pillars are at rhythmic and regular intervals in the building. My colleague Hallie drew this floor plan, which shows the strict grid pattern of the design, which undergirds the more organic appearance. Anne Jarmusch described the home as combining Wrightian placemaking with the airy modernism of Southern California. It's a beautiful home. It's been wonderfully restored in recent years, and I love the comfortable feel of the interior. Very happy place to spend an afternoon. The second apprentice I'll mention that came from Taliesin and Frank Lloyd Wright is Sim Bruce Richards, pictured here with a model of one of his houses. Richards came to San Diego from Oklahoma. He came to settle down in San Diego in 1940. During the war, he worked in the Public Works Office of the Navy. The head of that unit was none other than Lloyd Rocco, and the two of them became firm friends. This wasn't the first time that Richards had been to San Diego. He came as an impressionable 17-year-old. He saw the Gill buildings in La Jolla and said later of the experience, "I knew then and there that I would someday become an architect." And Richards remained a very big fan of Gill. He owns the only furniture that Gill ever made. And he was also appreciated the work of Lillian Rice. They shared similar influences from their respective times at Berkeley. In 1957, when Richards was president of the local chapter of the AIA, journalists suggested that Richard's style was modern. Many of his contemporaries would have taken that as a compliment, but Richards bristled at the suggestion. He said that his work wasn't modern, rather it was natural. And a good example of his natural style is the Engstrand house in La Mesa, built in 1964. If we, you'll see this typical Richards interior, full of cedar and just a very nice airy feel. If we compare this house with Philip Johnson's Leonard house, built in 1954 on Long Island, which is a classic example of the international style, we see what was distinctive about the work of Richards. So you've got Richards' sitting room on the right there, and Johnson's lounge on the left. And what strikes me straight away is the informality of Richards. I don't know about you, but I'd feel much more comfortable and relaxed in the Engstrand house. Informality is an important characteristic of San Diego design. There is no San Diego style, as I said, but there is a San Diego lifestyle. And that's what Richards and others were hoping to capture. In his buildings, what's most important is how people live in the building, not the style of it. A big part of the informal feel is the use of natural materials. The Johnson house on the left has lots of steel and glass, which is what we associate with Los Angeles and East Coast modernism and the modernism of Europe. But Richards built in wood, particularly cedar. And Richards is also very sensitive to nature and the siting of the house. You'll see here that the round things with numbered on the screen are all boulders, and he's had to work hard to situate the house on the left of that sketch into the landscape. He was trying to do it with removing the fewest number of boulders. He worked very hard to nestle the house amongst the boulders. There are no floor-to-ceiling windows, which was de rigueur in Johnston's international style. Richards didn't like to have a window closer than 20 inches to the floor. He liked to place his windows strategically so that one could glimpse nature outside. And let's look at the exterior of the house compared with the Johnson house. This image is a very clear illustration of the distinctive nature of San Diego modernism. There's a very stark contrast between these two houses. There's a rigor, even a coldness, about Johnson's Leonard house on the right, where Engstrand's house, the Engstrand house by Richards, is so warm and inviting. Johnson there on the right makes no effort to be part of the landscape, but Richards is working hard to integrate his house with the landscape. And you can see there on the image on the left, the boulders that we saw numbered in the earlier drawing. We could say that, as Frank Lloyd Wright used to say, Johnston's house is on the hill, but Richards' house is of the hill. The word integration is important to Richards. He wasn't only trying to integrate the house with the site, he also liked to integrate art with his architecture. He worked a lot with Jim Hubble. On the right here, you'll see a beautiful Hubble banister, in which don't you just want to run your hand along that and feel it. Richards talked about creating a sensuous environment, and this banister sums that up for me. All the cedar in the house smelled great, and of course it created a wonderful acoustic, something that Mrs. Engstrand, who was a pianist, appreciated. On the left of your screen, you'll see one of Hubble's wild and whimsical light fittings in the hallway. And I couldn't resist including other images of artworks Richards integrated into his designs. There's more Hubble here, and a fireplace featuring 300 tiles made by Rhoda Lopez. So what we see in the Engstrand house is four things that were characteristic not just of Richards' work, but also San Diego mid-century modernism more generally. Informality, the use of natural materials, a sensitivity to sight, and an integration of art and architecture. I want to show you on the left here, again, that same image of Richard's I showed you earlier. The model is a house of the Waldron's house from around 1955, which actually was never built. That model was built by Kendrick Bangs Kellogg, who worked in Richard's office when he was a young architecture student. And you'll see the similarity between Kellogg's first house on the right, the Babcock House in Mission Beach, and the model he did for Richard's. And you'll see how the story continues to the next generation. Let me go back. That on the right, the Babcock House, was the first house that Kellogg built. He was 23 when he built that house. And he went on to be an internationally famous architect. He died in 2024. He's never really received the attention he deserved, but soon I think he'll be having his moment in the sun, because he left his archives to the UCSB Architecture Archive in Santa Barbara. And they'll soon be putting on an exhibition and producing a monograph from all the papers they've received. Although it's going slower than it was meant to, because when Kellogg gave them the work, it was all covered in mildew and very, very dangerous. I don't know, but for some reason they're all wearing Hamzat suits to look at Kellogg's drawings. This is the Doolittle House, an amazing house in Joshua Tree, built over a 25-year period, starting in the 80s. One of Kellogg's great houses is here in La Jolla, the Yen House, also called the Lotus House because of the lotus-shaped leaves on the roof. And there's so much more I could say about Kellogg and so many wonderful photographs of his buildings, but I'll restrain myself and just show you a Julius Schulman image of the interior of the Yen House. I want to conclude this presentation on the distinct modernism of San Diego with talking about Cliff May. This might come as a surprise to some, as he's not often thought of as being either modern or San Diegan, but he was most definitely both of these things. May did make his name in Los Angeles, the city where he's most normally associated, but his roots in San Diego were deep. Both sides of his family go back generations, or 6 generations, and he was related to 2 of San Diego's most prominent families. He may have ended up leaving the city, but we'll see that his architectural vision was very much inspired by San Diego. May was raised in Mission Hills, and as we've already said, his home on Albatross Street was opposite 3 houses that Gill built for Catherine Tietz. As I said, he played in those houses as a child, and he played with a pair of brothers called Styris, whose father was Gill's master craftsman. It was Mr. Styris who taught May the woodworking skills that were to play an important part in his career. He spent his summers at his aunt's ranch in Las Flores Rancho, located at what is now Camp Pendleton. And these were formative years, and May loved the easy family living based around a courtyard. He concluded, the basic old Californian plan was a much better way to build and live. And another house that made an impression on him was La Casa de Estudio in Old Town, which was built by his great-grandfather. He'd often visit this house, and just after he was born, it was beautifully restored by Hazel Waterman. What you see on the screen is Waterman's plan of the house, and she knew of May's connection, and she presented May with this drawing, which I'm pleased to say is now in the History Center. The Estudio House is a 1-story adobe house with a U-shaped floor plan. All the rooms opened directly into the corridor and courtyard. There was no interior hallway. And this house became a touchstone for May, and he referred to it throughout his career. Its influence can be seen in many of his projects, both the large and the small. May was a very talented man. He led a jazz band and considered making a career in music. And thanks to Mr. Styris, he was very good at woodwork. Soon after he got married, he was in Barker Brothers looking for furniture for his new home. And he realized that he could build furniture as good as that in the store. So he asked his new wife, Jean, to distract the salesman as he took some measurements and made sketches of the Monterey style furniture. And there's an example of a May chair right opposite where I am now at the La Jolla Historical Society, which is interesting. May soon built enough furniture for his own home, but he didn't stop there. He carried on making furniture, but he had nowhere to store it. His father-in-law, who was a local property developer, suggested that he put some of his furniture in one of the houses that he was trying to sell. One client liked the furniture so much that he asked for a house to go with the furniture. So, at the age of 24, May designed his first house in Talmadge. It was very well received and was featured in the San Diego Union. The house soon sold, and May never looked back. He was to enjoy a glittering 57-year career. He went on to build 1,000 custom homes, and another 18,000 were built to his designs. He was given the moniker the father of the ranch house, and his influence spread throughout America and beyond. All this without any architectural training. He was only given an architectural license at the very end of his life, which I'm sure was purely honorific. This is May's second house, the Lindstrom House, also in Talmadge, built in 1933. Note the U-shaped floor plan, one room wide, with all the rooms facing into the central courtyard. You know where he got that idea from. Even the front door, you'll notice, leads straight into the patio. There's a high degree of privacy and an easy flow here between the inside and the outside. There's the exterior of the house. It's what May called a blank and aloof facade, which is something, one of his principles. May was never interested in how a house looked from the street. He was much more concerned about the kind of life it enabled people to live. The house has many traditional Californian features, but it was full of modern gadgetry. It had the first Pullman lavatory. The Lindstrom House was featured in Architectural Digest, which wasn't bad for a young man with no architectural training and very limited experience. May spoke very early in his career of his ambition to give San Diego a true architecture of early Californian days, modernized to fit present requirements. He stayed true to that goal throughout his career. He was motivated by a desire to give his clients the kind of experience that he had enjoyed in his youth. He wanted to build houses that allowed people, quote, to live like a real Californian lives. There's a remarkable consistency to May's career. He was always selling a way of life. He claimed that he just built one kind of house and only had one style, and that style was a San Diegan style. In 1934, he designed his first tract housing on Hillside Drive in La Jolla. These are known locally as the Munchkin houses. The story is that the actors playing the Munchkins in the film The Wizard of Oz were misbehaving and they were sent away to La Jolla to get them out of the way. Sadly, I've never been able to find any proof of that story. I hope that some emerges. May built about 36 houses before moving to LA in 1938, and it was there, as I've said, that his career really took off. He was keen to show how his ranch style could be adapted to houses both large and small. He loved to build large custom houses, but his ranch style could be produced on a modest scale at a reasonable price. This was a design he did for Good Housekeeping, and the fact he could do such modern designs in the post-war years when there was a building boom was very important. You'll see that he's still here got the same principles as the Lindstrom House, U-shaped, an entry directly into the patio, or the rooms facing the patio. And these houses could be mass produced cheaply. He'd team up with a local builder who'd put up one of these houses in a day. And this one photograph is of a Vista subdivision from 1952. These were sold as the houses that Dreams built. They were compact and cheap, but they still had a sense of spaciousness due to the fact that all the rooms opened onto the patio and had floor-to-ceiling glass. May's houses created the opportunity for the post-war generation to access the informal, carefree lifestyle that was an important element of the American dream. May achieved what many European modernists aspired to do but failed, which was to bring modernist design to the masses. What May built was practical, livable modernism. May was completely unaware of European modernism. When he finally came across the work of Le Corbusier in 1945, he dismissed him as someone who doesn't know how to live. Despite his enormous success and influence, May was not discussed in intellectual discourse during his lifetime. His houses were dismissed as little more than a crude variation of vernacular form. And in some ways, his work provides a counterpoint to Irving Gill, with whom we started. Gill too was dismissed as someone who merely extracted the form of the vernacular, in his case, the missions. Both May and Gill have been underestimated. They both took local forms and employed them as jumping off points to a unique version of modernity. Both of them made a significant contribution to the distinct modernism of San Diego. So, in conclusion, the story that we have tried to tell in the book is the story of the development of distinct modernism in San Diego. We can't point to a body of work and say, look, there's the San Diego style. But we have highlighted several characteristics that can be found in the work of the city's leading architects. And these characteristics include a link with Gill and an appreciation of the architectural tradition of the region, a desire for harmony and integration, an appreciation of simplicity, which leads to a certain modesty and restraint. San Diego's modernism was never about show, it was about lifestyle and the creation of welcoming, informal spaces which had a strong link between the indoors and the outdoors. So I hope that's given you a flavour of what's in the book, a desire to learn more and maybe even buy a copy. It's available on the website of our publisher, Modern San Diego. That's modernsandiego.com. So I'll leave it there. There are, I think, a couple of minutes for questions. I'm very pleased to see that we're finishing with the same number of participants as we started with, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, that is a good sign. Your lecture was excellent.
Thank you, Dean. I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have or comments. That would be always good.
All right, let's see what we have. Doesn't look like anybody has asked any questions yet. Oh, wait a minute. There's one. I see. Oh, could you please show the book? I have the copy that I just won't show it full screen, but here's the cover of the book.
Yeah, and it's as I mentioned, it's a painting that we commissioned of someone to do a picture of Gill's Teats house, and we were happy with it. We thought it was different to. We didn't want just a black and white photograph of a modernist building like so many books about on this subject do. We wanted to have an image that was different or distinctive, so we commissioned this oil, which turned out nicely, I think.
All right. Somebody said just wonderful. Thank you, Soho and Doctor.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
And we got the book shown. Excellent lecture, Mark. Thank you for taking the time with us today.
It was a pleasure. It was a real pleasure, and I'm happy to do something for. Well, is that Anne Jarmusch? Is that?
It is Anne Jarmusch.
Oh, Anne! I thank you so much. I'm so pleased to hear that you were on the lecture. I've read many of your articles, and you mentioned Frank Mead, who he really is. I think he is definitely worthy of further research. And there is someone in called John Cross in LA who's very keen on him, and so he's the best source. But there's definitely more on Frank Mead. Does the book cover any minimalist structures that Gill did on? No. I wrote. We don't really talk about the Barona Indian Reservation, although I did write a book about Gill's churches in 2023, and that had a chapter on the chapel at the Barona Reservation, which is a great building.
Nope. I seem to be back. I guess that is about it, and we're just about out of time. So perfect. Just a moment. And okay, thank you, Mark, for the fascinating and thought-provoking presentation. It's always rewarding to see San Diego history through a new lens. And today's talk reminds us that our city's architectural legacy is not only rich, but also uniquely its own, shaped by visionaries like Irving J. Gill and carried forward by generations of designers who embrace simplicity, collaboration, and a deep connection to place. Thank you all again for joining us today and for your continued support of Penning the Past and the work of Save Our Heritage organization. We hope to see you again next month when our friend Nancy Carroll Carter will present Balboa Park's Botanical Building. Until then, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again, Mark. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dean. Pleasure.